All right, let's get it started. Some people will still continue to follow in. Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Jennings, and welcome to RVA Tech's Tech It Yourself webinar series, where today we're going to be talking about the role of the Chief Data Officer and providing some ideas, hopefully, on how you can propel your career forward. Again, my name is Lori Jennings. I am the founder of Jennings ProSearch, which is an IT and data executive recruiting firm. I'm also the Data Summit Chair. I helped found this a couple of years ago, and I've been very fortunate to work with some innovative data leaders here in the area and just watch as this role continues to grow. Our community is it's growing very quickly as people continue to look towards data to monetize for better customer service, for marketing, etc. So before I get started introducing the panelists, I want to encourage some of you to turn on your video. I see Christopher's in there. If you want to do that, it makes it more interactive. If any of you have been in these webinars, it's hard to look at just sometimes blank space. So I'd love you to turn on your videos. If you want to chat amongst yourself, oh, thank you. Yeah. Comment if something resonates with you. If you see somebody in here that you know and you want to send them a private message in chat, do that. This is the best networking we have right now. All right, I'm going to start with some questions, and then I'm going to leave some time at the end for your questions that you can put in the chat box at any time, or if you want to wait and try to ask the question yourself or wait till we're done, that's fine too. All right, let me get going with introducing the panelists. So first we have Karen Bernhard. She is the Deputy Chief Data Officer at Citibanamex, which is Citibank. We have Reed Colson, the CDO at Markel Corporation. And we have Carlos Rivero from the CDO at the Commonwealth of Virginia. Welcome, and thank you so much for your time. I know everybody's so busy, and data is so important right now, so thank you for your time being here. All right, why don't I start off by asking you an easy question. Tell us about each of your journeys in getting to the role of CDO. And I want to start with Karen, and then Reed and Carlos.
Great. Hey, guys. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. So my journey to CDO role has been one, very interesting, and one that has been very dynamic. I first started off in data. Actually, my background and what I went to school for is more a science background, biology, exercise physiology. And I actually put myself through grad school being a data person for the financial aid office. And so at that point, I actually pursued the data career by going to work at the for Virginia State, which was the State Council for Education, and working in institutional research. And then fortunately for me, Cap One recruited me, and I joined when they were, still small and startup and growing. And they're a really great data company. At Cap One, this is where it got really dynamic. I rotated through many roles, which I think is a key aspect of becoming a CDO. I was a data analyst, I was a statistician, I was a business analyst, but I also took on operational roles, tech delivery roles, governance roles, stewardship roles, always just expand, my skill set, my learnings, get a deeper understanding around the holisticness of what it takes to be a really great data expert. And those were always like two-year, maybe 2 years, 3 year stints. And then I left Cap One and became the Chief Data Officer for Liberty Mutual. And then Citibank called me and said, hey, would you be interested in going down to Mexico and being the Chief Data Officer for our Mexico region division. And that was a huge, also adventure. Part of me wanted a challenge of working in a global role in a global company, and for a different regulatory environment and different type of big bank. So that's been, my 2-minute version of my journey. It's been super fun. So over to you, Reed.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I guess, similar to Karen, a lot of different roles in the data space. I guess if I go back to the beginning, coming out of grad school, I ended up in a team, where frankly, I'd say I kind of lucked into data. I moved into analyst / statistician role. Did predictive modeling on cash advance at casinos, that kind of stuff. Wasn't by design. It was kind of that early phase of the career of exploration. And to me, what really hit me was that every day in data is like a treasure hunt. And so, you're always finding something of value. And I really liked that, coming in each day knowing that, I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm going to find something and it's going to be exciting to me or somebody else. And so it just, kind of kept me energized and passionate about the space. Worked at a couple of different companies, again, like Karen said, at Cap One, got to do a bunch of different things. I did talk about it as having been on the three sides of data. Worked on the quant side for a while, worked on the data governance, data stewardship side for a while, and worked in the technology organization for a while. So I got to have a well-rounded perspective, of the different parts of the organization. I think one of the interesting things for me is career-wise, the final step was really a connection through kind of what I would call semi-work stuff. So was part of a group that built the Autism at Work program at Capital One, got to connect with Faison here in town. And, for folks who don't know, Faison was founded by Markel's chairman, and got an introduction there and got into some conversations about what they're trying to do with analytics and kind of found my way into an opportunity to do that. So, the I'll call them extracurriculars or service projects are an important part of the journey.
Thank you, Reed. So like Karen, I came from a science background. I originally was in marine ecology and systems ecology specifically, and building out spatial models in large marine ecosystems like Biscayne Bay, Florida Bay, and Tampa Bay. So as a result of that experience, there was a lot of data integration, especially in GIS and spatial domains. So that required quite a bit of, data wrangling and data documentation and understanding the limits and constraints in some of the data assets that we're working with. So that was kind of like the early start of my data journey, and being able to integrate a variety of different spatial models, leveraging GIS as kind of like the centerpiece of that. And from there, it just kind of grown, organically through the different applications of data and data assets in, specifically science, specifically in fishery science, population management, population dynamics, things like that. But then ultimately translating that into more technology-oriented skills, not just from a science domain, but how do you do this at the enterprise level? How do you try to leverage your data assets more holistically across the entire enterprise, especially when you have many different scientists kind of working in their own silos, working in their own closets, in their own labs, and not really wanting to share. But there's a lot of synergy in being able to share those data assets across the organization to get a much better indication of what's happening out in the real world. And we're trying to model real world environments, what's happening out there in the physical environment, but doing it in the digital space. And it doesn't help when everyone was just kind of really hoarding and holding on to their little piece of data, when in reality, it's bringing all those data assets together to give you a really clear picture of what's going on externally. And so taking that experience and being able to leverage that across different types of businesses, different types of enterprises, has really been what my career story has been about. Ultimately leading into how do you derive intelligence from those data assets that you collect and manage and deal with on a regular basis. And that ultimately led to my business intelligence graduate degree, and then ultimately to Chief Enterprise Architect and Chief Data Officer at the Federal Transit Administration, which ultimately led to this position at the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Wow, thank you. We were talking about it earlier, that a lot of people in the Richmond data community have come through Cap One at some point, and we see Reed and Karen both have, but still have varied backgrounds. And then we have Carlos with the federal background. That's great. There are a lot of different ways to get to the Chief Data Officer. All right, so this role is still fairly new. It's growing in complexity as people add data privacy, and then COVID on top of that. I mean, there's just so much being added every day. So share with us what the day in the life looks like for you as a Chief Data Officer in 2020 right now, and maybe what some of your biggest challenges are. And I'll start with Reed and then go to Carlos and end with Karen.
Yeah, sure. the days are varied. There are different things each day. I'd say, some things that are fairly consistent. There's a lot of work in sort of trying to identify and, set the vision and direction for the company around data. And then, getting folks on board with that, and getting key stakeholders and key partners to kind of participate and move that along. Markel grew through acquisition, so we've got, a plethora of systems and data sources and things that are coming through. So we've got a lot of work that we're doing to, streamline and simplify. And so there's a good bit of, kind of program leadership activity that happens around that. There's a fair amount of, stakeholder management. So we've got, divisional leaders who run various parts of our organization that have, needs, from my organization. And so understanding what those needs are and helping them understand kind of the path to getting those things satisfied, and then, marshaling the resources, behind us to be able to do that. And so then that gets into, how we're running and managing and organizing our teams. For us, we've moved to, we've borrowed from the Scaled Agile framework, but brought that into a data organization that does reporting, data governance, data science, and a little bit of innovation. And we've got these blended teams that, kind of play in, business domain spaces that we use to support that demand coming from us. And then there's a fair bit of the day that's really other topics for the organization. I'm sure everybody has this going on right now around future of work planning or return to the office, or, we're doing some work on career pathing and compensation study type stuff to kind of figure out, how we paint a path forward for folks in our organization. So, a lot of data projects. I don't get as close to being sort of in the weeds on the, here's how we're going to predict this or the decisions we made, but, setting up the organization so folks on the team can really drive on that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I agree with Reed 100%. Every day is dynamic. Every day is different. You don't necessarily know what you're gonna walk into on any given day because things happen all the time. So you're looking at how do you continuously implement your vision of how the organization needs to function with regards to managing and leveraging its data assets, but all the while dealing with your stakeholders. And your stakeholders are varied, not just horizontally across the organization in the different business units. And in my case, we have 63 executive branch agencies that all span, the broad spectrum of all kinds of businesses and industries that we work with, but also up and down or vertically within the organization. You're dealing with, data custodians that are more the technical stewards of the data, but you're working with data stewards as well, data owners, executive leadership, data consumers, the scientists, the data scientists that are working with the data, data analysts that want to have access to the data assets. So, you have a wide range of stakeholders that you work with on a regular basis. And depending on who you're speaking with or what fires are burning that day, those are the folks that you're going to most engage with. So you really have to have a lot of skill in being able to shift from different perspectives when you're working with folks, right? You can't take the same perspective that you do with an executive leader of an agency and then take that same approach with a data custodian that's working on a very technical issue that they need to address, or a CISO who's dealing with a security issue, or a privacy officer who's dealing with something in a confidentiality or privacy space. So depending on your audience and the individuals that you're engaged with, you almost have to wear a different hat and being able to not just look at the problem from their perspective, but also try to address it from the more enterprise perspective as well. So that makes for very interesting days, that's for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. My days are very much like yours, which is good to hear. It's a little validation that I'm not sometimes just spinning. You get every hour the topic does change. I'll add one more topic to the agenda. For me, regulatory and working with regulatory agencies, such as being a big bank and dealing both with U.S. and Mexico regulatory agencies. It's going to be more and more, they're being more and more demanding about how we're managing our data, how we're protecting the customer information, and auditing us really thoroughly. So that's ends up being a pretty big topic also. but transformation and analytics. And then we have a large, what we call data business as usual operation that we have to make sure is always operating. So those are typically the three things around regulatory, strategy, transforming the company, and then usually operating day to day. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And I know finding talent is a big issue. I think Reed, you mentioned that too. Developing talent in the data space is a challenge for a lot of people. So based on everything y'all said, what do you think the key leadership skills are needed to be a CDO today? Carlos, you kind of touched on a little bit of this, but let's start with you, Carlos, and then Karen, and then Reed.
So communications and relationship building are absolutely critical. This is not something you can do on your own. This is not a technology problem, it's a people problem. And in order for you to be able to address that aspect of the enterprise issue, you really need to be very, very good in building coalitions, building collaboration, building relationships with a wide variety of stakeholders, as I mentioned before, not just vertically within the organization, but horizontally across a variety of different business units. Because at the end of the day, it's being able to integrate data assets from all of the different components of the business that allows the executives within that organization to make the best, most informed decisions possible. And we always talk about silos. We always talk about what my friends over in Maryland call the cylinders of excellence. But the reality is that for us to be able to make those informed decisions and propel the organizations forward, we need to be able to bring those data assets together. And you can only do that if you bring the people together first.
Great. I will add, I think one of the key components is communication skills. The data space is actually feared by most people. They don't understand it. They think math and data and technology, that combination is feared. And so I feel like my job at times is to explain solutions, explain problems, to explain the analytics in a way that anyone can understand and that makes it easy and approachable. And so once you're able to do that, then you're able to convince people that, hey, the direction we're going, it becomes much easier. So communication's super, super important. So that's one I'll add.
Yeah, well, you guys got the two very good ones. I totally agree with. I was going to maybe do a little bit different take on communication. I think, we speak a different language than a lot of the people that we work with. And so, there's a tendency to speak in our terms. So let's talk about the confusion matrix versus how, the data that you're showing could help solve the business problem. And so I think context translation storytelling to help paint the picture for folks, because, a lot of what we do is conceptual. And so helping folks really be able to understand what it is that your team or others in the organization are bringing to the table with respect to value, and help them honestly have confidence to take a little bit of a risk, because a lot of what we're trying to do is ask people to change the way they're doing things. Like we talk about AV, challenge, champion, challenger. They've been successful. How is what we're suggesting, offering, or bringing going to help them be, more successful, have less risk, and move to a better situation? And so that ability to help them really understand and get a concrete feel for what it is that you're bringing to the organization is a key piece in helping the team be successful.
Great, thank you. Yeah, communication. You hear that in every single role now. You have to have good communication, business skills, understand the business. Thank you. So let's talk about, what do you see are the most effective things that people, both inside and outside your organization, are doing to help them get in a position to take on a chief data officer role? Is it education? Is it certain career path? What is it? And I'll start with Karen again and go to Reed and then Carlos.
Yeah, I think this is the hardest question so far. I don't necessarily.
You're first.
Yeah, I don't think that there's necessarily one thing or one path. I think there is, for people that are successful, there's a curiosity and problem solving. So they're curious about a problem, they're willing to dig into it, they're willing to actually present and be proactively present creative problem solving around those problems. I keep saying problems. I think also in terms of just taking risks. So people tend to try to go up the chain vertically. What I'm seeing is if people are willing to take risks in their career, try new things, kind of expand their horizons, they end up, I think, accelerating their career. I think that people that spend time, devote a lot of energy to what Reed was talking about, to what I was talking about around telling a good story, effectively communicating, they tend to also gain trust of senior leaders. So I think that's what.
Yeah, those are good points. I think, you're saying risk. I think I'm just going to keep copying what Karen says, but put a different spin on it, because that makes it really easy for me. When I was thinking about risk, what I find sometimes is that organizations go through change, and we're all going through a ton of change right now. And I've kind of identified, or at least I observed, kind of two camps of the way people react to that. One reaction is to try to lock everything down and keep it as sane as you possibly can, because that feels safe to you. Those, to me, always seem to be the individuals who miss the opportunity, right? And so run at the change, run at the risk, run at the problem, and help the organization through it. Create some order or framework out of that chaos. Those challenges, those changes, those opportunities, you could go take a risk, feel uncomfortable with, but develop some tremendous skills and get some really good wins that are valuable to the organization.
So I'm going to borrow from both Karen and Lori. So Karen, back to what you were talking about. I mean, it really does get to the point where you're looking for solution seekers, right? People who are able to identify solutions to issues, problems, constraints that just kind of come up in the organization. And Lori, you mentioned business, right? And know the business and understand the business that you're in. And I think, it's all about context, right? And depending on whatever organization, whatever business that organization is in, they have a specific function and need and requirement to perform, right? There's some performance objective associated with that particular organization. In academia is writing out research papers and building out the knowledge base for the work that we were doing. In the federal government space, it's being able to manage a particular natural resource more effectively. And in state government is being able to provide services to our constituents that gives them the best outcomes possible. So it's really about knowing your business and understanding what the outcomes that the business desires, and then figuring out what are the tools and techniques and technologies that need to be implemented to help move and propel that organization forward. But a big part of that is also business process, right? Understanding what are the different business processes that are generating those performance measures, and then being able to be influential in either making those business processes more efficient, more effective, or just completely transforming them to something that's a lot better than what they had before. But again, that takes risk, right? You have to be able to take on some amount of risk and put yourself out there to show that you have the understanding of the business, you have the understanding of the technology and the business process that needs to be changed. But to get a little bit deeper on that and give some more practical advice, it's one, business acumen. Definitely, you have to have business acumen to understand the business. But another one, and Reed alluded to it earlier, is math. You have to have some understanding of math and mathematical principles, logic principles, to know how the pieces fit together, right? And then be able to decipher that. And then obviously there's technology, right? Because a lot of this stuff gets implemented in technology or in either innovative uses of technologies. So being able to bring those three things together as a package and be able to communicate that to your leadership to say, if we were to implement this new solution or this new capability or transform this process this way, we would be able to perform this much better. And be able to communicate that are, I think, the effective ways to be able to move forward.
Great. Thank you. And for me as an executive recruiter, I get, people they want people that have a leadership voice. And one of the ways that I've seen people move up, just being the Data Summit chair, the people that are involved with that are stepping up, that are running meetup groups, that are getting involved. I mean, the networking alone that they do on there. And I see several people in the audience that are on the committee with me and or, that have spoken. So stepping up and speaking about your experience and helping mentor other people. in your community. And then that allows you to highlight your communication skills and your understanding of the business and the technology and everything that's, required. I can't tell you how many people over the last 2 years that I've seen present have all moved up immediately after the data summit. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think it's just they get more exposure, and that's part of it, stepping out and taking risk. So let's flip this question on around. And what do you see people doing that are maybe hindering their ability to move up in the organization? And let's see whose turn it is. Okay, Reed, Carlos, Karen.
Excellent. The first thing that comes to mind for me is the things that I see folks do that hinder their career is only sticking to what they're comfortable with, right? So you think as you begin your career, you might have maybe gotten academic training on either a technical or quantitative topic. It's comfortable to stay in that space. It's uncomfortable to go step into a project space or a strategy space or a communication or speaker space. And so by doing that, you're slowing the progression and development of those skills. Because what you're going to find is that the journey and the progression, each new level isn't doing more of what got you success to the level that you're at. There's something new or something different in that next step. And being comfortable taking on things that make you uncomfortable help you develop those skills to be ready for that next step in the journey.
Yeah, I agree 100%, Reed. I mean, people tend to, like you said, they stay where they're comfortable, and in many cases, some, those are technologists, right? That either stick to the technologies that they know and work only in technology and don't think about the other aspects of the problems that we're trying to solve. So it's reaching out to other members of your community, of your workspace, and be able to start to understand what their perspectives are. Because the reality is that to be in a leadership role, you have to understand the perspectives of all of your stakeholders. And you can't do that if you're either locked away in a closet programming all the time or only doing some aspect of your job or some aspect of the organization's capabilities. You have to be able to reach out and connect with folks across a broad spectrum of perspectives, of capabilities, of business units, to be able to then bridge the gap between what it is that they can do currently and what they could do ultimately if you all work together and come up with innovative solutions that leverage technologies, that leverage processes, and leverage the capabilities of people. But you don't do that in isolation in your comfort zone. You do that when you expand outside of the things that you know and work with people that you don't normally get to work with.
I'm going to add two things. One is having a champion or a sponsor. So I know as actually a female, it's actually been difficult to progress over a certain level. And one of the things that I finally realized is I actually need senior people that are actually championing me, sponsoring me. And I actually had to seek out those relationships and nurture them. They weren't happening naturally. As a female, it just wasn't happening. And so I oftentimes talk to my female cohorts and say, hey, have you done these things? Have you gone and talked to? Because I think a lot of times other senior leaders, oftentimes there's no malicious intent or anything like this, but they oftentimes feel a little bit of an obstacle speaking on behalf of their female team or team members. There's a barrier there. And so you do have to approach them. They're always willing to do it if you have a really good relationship with them, but it's almost they need nudging and you need to do some of the nudging. So I will put that out there because I know there's probably a lot of females on the call right now, and it's kind of a little bit of a unique perspective. The other thing is I'd say that you need to have a vision, you need to have a voice, you need to be able to put yourself out there in terms of your ideas. And without that, the senior leaders are not going to see that you're one with the creative ideas, with the vision to transform or to really impact the company. And that feels, I think, at times scary, risky, and sometimes I think people avoid doing that. And so that, I think those two things for me personally have been probably the biggest areas that I've really had to lean into and kind of embrace.
That's great, Karen. Thank you for bringing up the whole mentorship with women, because obviously there are we're all looking to bring women up, and so that's a good point that not everybody thinks about. Personally, if y'all are on here, women that are data scientists, data analytics, people, we'd love to get you involved in the Data Summit, and y'all can reach out to me directly as we start to plan that. We have no idea when we'll have a conference again, but we're hopefully going to be doing it sometime around March next year. So we'd love to get y'all involved in that and have some opportunities to network and find mentors. Another question, and let's see, all right, we've got some time. If y'all want to start, if anybody wants to start asking questions, please start putting things in the chat box, and I'll switch over. But I'm going to ask one other question real fast. What is the single, maybe most important step, if you can think of one, that helped propel your career forward to the CDO? So something that if you hadn't done this, it was probably a risky move, that you don't feel you'd be where you are now. And whose turn is it? Reed, and then Carlos, and then Karen.
Man, I got lucky. No, I'm joking. You know, I don't know that there was one single thing that when I think back on it, I've talked to folks, it's persistence. It's not one thing. It's just, you know, honestly, every day trying to continue to move forward. So you're going to have, I think, a realization at some point that the career is not a linear journey. It's not advanced every sort of whatever time frame that you have in your mind or things like that. And so to me, it was just continuing to be persistent. You know, I think Karen talked about realizations. You know, I think there was a point in my career where I felt like, you know, wow, I'm great, but nobody gets it. What was really happening is I didn't get the feedback I was being given. And so I think when I got to where I could openly and honestly, you know, address some of the feedback that I had that was holding me back, that, you know, may or may not have been important to me at the time, you know, that I think really helped me, you know, do some of the things we talked about in terms of, you know, taking risk and connecting better and you know, supporting the business in the way they need to be supported versus the way I felt like things should be done.
So I agree with Reed that it wasn't one specific thing. It was just working on a variety of different projects across the various organizations I was in, starting with the University of Miami at the Rosenstiel School, then with NOAA Fisheries, obviously with FTA, and now with the Commonwealth of Virginia. So it's working across a wide variety of organizations and individuals within the organization on multiple projects that really kind of helped propel the mindset to take on this role. But I think if I were to credit one thing that would really prepared me for this role, is taking all of my experiences that I had working on those different projects and then going on and doing my BI master's degree, because that kind of the BI master's really kind of put it into more of an enterprise perspective of how do I take all of these experiences and be able to put them in an environment and put them to use in a way that helps an enterprise think in these terms. And I think that really kind of solidified that mindset and allowed me to move forward.
Cool. Well, I totally agree. It wasn't one thing. I will say, you know, I spent 18 years at Capital One, and yeah, I rotated through a lot of roles. There was about toward the end of my time there, I was like, hey, I'm actually not learning anything new, and I was kind of just going through the routine. And I kind of woke up one day and go, what am I doing? Like, I don't want to be, you know, 10 years from now saying I didn't do anything the last 10 years of my career. I wasn't challenged. I didn't learn anything new. I didn't impact the business. I didn't transform anything. You know, for me, you know, I really like to improve things. I really enjoy doing that. I like to tackle big problems. And so I think for me, the decision to leave Capital One was a really big milestone. And it then made me, it was a really big risk. 18 years at one company, it felt like I was breaking up with them. Like, oh my gosh, I'm breaking up with you. It's a divorce. No, it wasn't like that. It was very friendly. But it allowed me to start looking and actually listening to outside perspectives, to outside opportunities, and really pick my next job, which was really fun. And I hadn't had that experience for quite a while. So I think just being open and listening to yourself, and recognizing when you're in that spot of like, hey, I'm on cruise control, or I'm not learning, or hey, I would like a really big, a different challenge, and take care of yourself. So yeah.
Those are great. Great points. Thank you. All right, I have a question from Sonali Shetty. She's a good friend of mine and somebody that's been a big mentor to me in women in tech. So good to see you, Sonali. She has a question on data governance and asks if you can speak to how you set a governance structure and acquire the authority to manage data governance conflicts. I'm not going to do the order. Y'all speak up.
Oh.
All right.
Okay. Well,
Karen, go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll give you kind of the situation, because I think it's probably very similar. In my current role in Mexico, it's very siloed, which is probably that way for many organizations, and everyone had their own version of the truth of data, and no one actually wanted to work with each other to actually declare a single definition, gold source, what have you. So like literally my first effort was say, hey, there is this thing called data governance, and here are the roles and responsibilities, and you are this role and you have these responsibilities, and set up a council, and basically through that council start monitoring and basically policing who was behaving, who wasn't. And super fun job at times, but not so much. And then there's the other, like when people are needing say referee, being that person that says, okay, I am the referee, you guys tell your side of the story, and we'll make a ruling, and then getting your council involved with understanding that they play a role in that. So there is a whole structure, structure you need to put in there around governing. There's roles, responsibilities, and then there's actually policy that you probably need to write to make sure that kind of enforces it. So anyways, that's what I've had to do. Yeah. Sometimes it's fun.
And to me, I'd say, like, maybe now's a good time. Never waste a good crisis. Find things that are a burning platform that governance helps solve. There's lots of great information and structure out there, from organizations like DAMA that talk about data management and how to do it. To me, the key to success is, again, getting the organizational buy-in and getting folks that will be willing to engage and participate. That's why I said, like, leverage something that's fearful for the organization. If it's regulation, if it's GDPR, if it's the California Privacy Act, find a place to start. And then start to build the structure around solving for that. And then, like Karen said, you do have to have a good network. And I've always liked the model where you have data executives that sit in various parts of the business, because they have, I'll say, control of the resource that you might need to fix things, whether that's business process or sponsorship with technology. But if you can get that right use case to start, get that partnership going with the data executives and start to show some traction, you can bring it to the other pieces of scope that you need over time.
So in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I was fortunate to come into a situation where the need was already there, and everyone acknowledged that that we need to have a solid data governance framework to help manage our data assets and be able to leverage them effectively. So the desire to bring that to the Commonwealth was already there. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what would be the best framework for our organization. And every organization is different. So it's not like you can have a recipe that automatically walk in and follow these steps and you'll have governance. It doesn't necessarily work that way, because you're dealing with people. and dealing with people. Everyone's unique and everyone has a different perspective, so you have to accommodate that. And again, every organization has a culture, so you have to be able to go in and understand the culture of that organization and then be able to find the right governance model that's going to speak to that culture, or at least be influential in changing that culture to accommodate the governance that you want to create. But in the Commonwealth of Virginia specifically, I realized that there were three basic components that need to be instilled within that framework. And number one was communication amongst all levels of government, being able to engage individuals. And as Rick was talking about, that engagement is key, because not only do you have to have data stewards and data officers engaged, but you also have to have their executive leadership engaged to be able to sponsor those changes that you want to make. Because at the end of the day, implementing policies or new policies or regulations, best practices or standards are all part of change management. You have to be able to manage that change, and you need that executive sponsorship. But in addition to that, we also had to have connection and communication with higher level state leadership, our delegates, our senators, our governor, the cabinet, being able to engage those individuals in the conversation with regards to how to best leverage those data assets to solve those complex problems. Now, in some cases, those problems are compliance, right? Regulatory compliance or compliance with regulations. But in other cases, you're talking about actually moving the organization forward from a performance perspective. So within the Commonwealth, we really looked at how do we develop a framework that engages all of those different levels, but then facilitates communication within those so that we can implement a governance policy and standard that speaks to all of those different needs. So it's not just one aspect of it, but it's all of those different components that need to work together to move data governance forward within the organization.
Hey, this is a little off topic, but Carlos made me think about this. One of the things that I think for all of us is really interesting is that different industries and organizations have different strengths in the data space. So every time I hear somebody from the public sector talk about what they have to do with respect to governance and data privacy and security, I thank God I'm not having to do that myself, because it's so much more involved and complicated, and there's so many different stakeholders. So the piece I was going to share on this is, when you're looking to solve a problem, look outside your industry, right? So for me, from my history, early days, and Karen will attest to this, Capital One was not good at BI. Retailers were really good at BI. So we went and talked to retailers about how they do it to kind of get, kind of perspective on the things that they put in place for that. So that just, it was off topic, but it made me think about there's answers outside your industry that are often better than the ones in your industry.
Great. Does anybody else have any other questions? I don't see anything in the chat box, but you're free to ask your own question, turn your mic on, show your face, or just, if you want to, I'll give you all a second to think about that. If not, I do have one final question, but want to give y'all an opportunity to talk.
Hello, my name is Irina Dolonyuk. I wanted to ask you, what is your immediate concern right now, and how is it different from any worries you have in the future? And more importantly, what actions are you taking to prevent that from happening?
Well, that's an interesting question, Irina. Immediate concerns. Obviously, public health and safety are an immediate concern. Making sure that individuals because as a response to the pandemic, one of the main things we want to do, obviously, we want to maintain our economy moving forward and being able to provide a livelihood for everyone who's participating. But at the same time, we want to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy and not putting themselves at risk. And so how do we leverage, and that's one of the things that I've been working quite a bit on, is how do we leverage the data assets that we normally collect as part of our operations to help inform our governor and his cabinet and our other state leaders to make the best decisions possible with regards to policy, and how do we communicate that policy to our stakeholders, to our residents and our constituents, to be able to highlight, your individual behaviors matter, right? The way you behave as an individual in society matters significantly more so now than ever before. And you're having a much greater impact than you ever thought possible. So how do we get people to understand that their individual behaviors have that degree of impact, and that in order for us to be safe and be able to move our economy forward, we each need change management internally. right? And be able to behave a little bit differently than we were used to, and that we thought should be normal. And then getting people to understand that there is a new normal that is either coming or already here that we need to address. And so being able to communicate that effectively, but being data driven and not just, you know, shooting it from the hip, is one of my biggest concerns, and being able to do that effectively is what I'm really focused on.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So in the same line, but slightly different, since I work for a big bank, we are obviously assessing the financial impact of COVID and the financial crisis. And in particular in Mexico, where it's been hit really, really hard. And we're rolling out new relief programs for our customers, and being creative, problem solving around, hey, what customers most being impacted? How do we do our bank branches? How do we make sure we can still serve? How do we roll out new digital services that we didn't have before, because people can't, you know, obviously visit us in the bank. And so there's a lot of activities around, hey, what does the crisis mean? The economic implications, how long it's going to last. But then there's also a lot of activities that are really customer focused around how do we help people right now through this very hopefully limited time period. And it's great. It's such a data driven problem that we've been able to use, you know, a really deep transactional data, a really deep customer data to solve a number of problems. So it's been a crisis. It's been, you know, for me personally, it's been kind of a fun crisis to actually help solve problems, make people's lives a little better. So.
Yeah. So not to pile on with the same thing, maybe I'll take a little bit different direction. You know, what the pandemic has done is put us all in a virtual work environment. And we have a culture, you know, around our company and our team that we really love. And so one of the things that we're talking a lot about now is that, you know, we have a number of open roles that we're trying to fill. And as we bring people in, you know, how do we bring them into that culture so they understand and appreciate it? And how do we keep that culture as, you know, maybe we work together less, or maybe not everybody's being virtual forever, part are in the office, part are home. So how do we take care of that culture as we, you know, introduce new folks, and the way we're working, you know, will continue to fluctuate and change, you know, over the next, you know, 6 to however many months we're going to be looking at this.
We have another question in the chat box from Brian Gailey. He asked, how would you define the ideal relationship between the CDO and the CIO? That's a great question.
You know, I'm happy to start. We have a great one. You know, we're partners, right? So we have, you know, basically the way we've described it is kind of defined, like there's certainly aspects of data that our CIO owns in the technology space, and there's aspects that I own, but together we just kind of work on trying to solve the same problems. We have a lot of the same stakeholders and business partners and constituents, and so we're constantly you know, kind of working through trying to compare notes on what they need and how our teams can partner to deliver it. So it's almost like we lead the same team in respect, but we have our areas of accountability that we focus on. So it's a really collaborative partnership.
Yeah,
I agree.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Oh, no, you're fine. I agree 100%. It is a collaborative relationship. And I think partnership is absolutely spot on. It is a partnership because, you know, you as the CDO are really more of a liaison between the business units and technology, right? And the CIO who's implementing those technologies. So if we were to get more specific, you know, we kind of deal more in the realm of, you know, data governance, some data architecture, some business intelligence or intelligence in general, but really the CIO shop is primarily focused on the implementation of those technologies to help facilitate that. But, you know, we kind of sit in the middle between the business units and the technologists, and being able to have that kind of relationship with the CIO as a partner in being able to create those solutions for the business is really where you derive a lot of benefit. And that's where I think the ideal situation is. You know, data is a business asset, not a technology asset. It may be implemented in technology, but the reality is it belongs to the business and it should be governed that way. And organizations that have their CDOs reporting to CIOs are, I think in many cases, are missing that point. That data is a business asset and you need to look at it that way.
Yep.
All right,
Yeah.
sorry. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to add a couple points. I totally agree with what Reed and Carlos was saying. I think one really important to align on vision. Sit down, make sure that from a capability, from an architecture, from an end vision, what the business needs is well reflected, and that the CIO and yourself are well aligned. We're also we actually say that we're one team. And that it's really hard to figure out who's on what team purposely, so that we have complete alignment around where we're headed and what we need to deliver. And then I think the move to Agile and Agile transformation actually unites the two teams even more so, because you have a combination of business, data, and engineers from the tech team together solving problems. And so to me, it's fun to see the blur in lines, because that means orientation doesn't matter. It's really the problem solving that matters. But first step, make sure end vision, you're aligned, and then the rest of it actually kind of falls into place.
Great. Okay, I stripped over Ryan Strider's question, which is a little different. I work for a mid-sized company that does not currently have a dedicated CDO position. Related CDO duties are shared across multiple departments and teams. At what point is it most effective for an organization to consider having an individual fill this role? So y'all are all big organizations, so.
I think it goes back to what Karen was saying earlier about having that champion, right? If it's everybody's job, then it's nobody's job, right? Because if you spread the peanut butter too thin, no one has enough of it to think that it's really their role to do. So, you know, there comes a point when an organization reaches a certain level of maturity that there's a certain amount of pain in not managing your data assets effectively. Either that pain is not complying with regulatory requirements, or that pain is underperforming market peers. You know, there's some degree of pain that the organization will experience, and then they realize that they're not leveraging their data assets effectively to be able to make the most informed decisions possible. And then they realize that, you know, data governance is important, managing our data assets is important, and we would need to have one individual who's accountable for that. And until those organizations experience that level of pain, it won't happen.
I'd also say when they're willing to fund more than a CDO, right? They have to fund the programs and the vision and the strategies that it's going to take to actually execute on what they're asking the CDO to do. I've seen a number of cases where organizations hire the role, and CDO in this case being, you know, lots of different Ds, data, digital, whatever, but then don't back them, you know, with the investment and the support that they need to be effective. So maybe one piece of advice is, if you are interviewing for a role, make sure that's there.
Yeah, I agree. I would also say that another thing that happens is some type of crisis around the data, and they realize, oh my gosh, we do have a big problem, and we need actually someone that knows what they're doing. So a little bit more reactive, but that's a possible path forward also. Yeah.
All right, we're nearing the end of the time. I'm going to ask one more question. And I see that Karen Aiken had another question that's very similar. So I'm going to move to Jesse Gordon's question here about how do you handle the themes that seem commonplace among scaled organizations: data integrity, shared organizational understanding of data sets, discrete data value streams, and data stewardship ownership. Let's take a stab at that one.
Very delicately. It's you know, all of those issues really play into the data governance framework, and having people at the table having these conversations about data integrity, about data quality, about being, you know, having the data fit for purpose, about data discoverability. You know, all of these things require individuals to kind of sit down and really think through why are these things important to the organization's performance, right? And strategic goals, right? What are we trying to accomplish from an organizational perspective, that these things that we're talking about, data quality, data integrity, data discoverability, better understanding, better use of data assets, how does that play a role in moving us forward in alignment with our strategic objectives. And then being able to find a path, identify why is it that we need to do these things? Because you always have to start with why, right? You have to have an understanding of why is this important to be able to elevate that to the level that action needs to be taken. And then the next question is, all right, how? What is it, what do we need to do? What are the processes that need to be in place to move that, or to move that forward? And then the what comes after that, right? What are the technologies we need to implement to be able to do that? So you have to start with why and alignment with the strategic objectives of the organization.
Yeah, I love that you asked with theme, because that kind of goes back into the storytelling. Like most of the time when you're going to go talk to somebody who's not a data person on that, they may not say this to you, but what's going on in their mind is, why should I care, right? Like, I'm not a data person. I'm not an IT person. That's what you guys own. Just go do it. And what they often don't get is that the business process or activity that they do makes it near impossible. I joke sometimes and say, our data team's not miracle workers. If you don't capture that piece of information, I can't report on it for you. So there's tough love with humor sometimes. But the theme that came to mind for me when I was hearing your question was data literacy. And so we're just on the early stages of this journey, but trying to help the organization understand why it can't be fixed by just your data and technology people alone. It's the whole village of the company that helps us get there on a lot of those topics.
All right, great. Well, we're nearing the end, so I'm going to cut it off now. Just want to thank everybody for being here. Great audience. Thank the panelists. Thanks to RVA Tech for hosting this. And we're going to